Also, Frage Nummer 1, bevor ich Forscher anfange. Shall we do the talk in English or sollen wir es in Deutsch machen?
Is it possible?
Yeah, Martin offered that he can switch back from English to German. I mean, from German
German
to
to
English.
English.
So I think you would like to have it in English? Okay, perfect. Let's do it in English.
Okay, do my best.
Okay. Yes, I would like to introduce Martin. I think Martin is one of my better known speakers this year. We spent quite a few times together in Berlin, and I know Martin through from Marcel. You started out as a
Waiter.
No.
Hotelfachschule, yeah, okay. Tourism school.
Tourism school, and then you went on a cruise ship for quite a bit, and then you became a DJ. Then you became a techno DJ in the 80s.
90s, okay.
I thought you moved to Berlin in the 90s.
Middle 90s.
Yeah. I thought Vienna was earlier. Okay. And then you started what we would say augmented reality or like new media company in Berlin.
Kind of, yes.
Mbox. And ever since then you do big spoken concepts for Frankfurt the Automesse as well as pavilions for the Expo in Shanghai, for instance. And I think I will leave you here from there.
Okay, I'll try to do it. Hello everybody, yeah, I'm Martin and I will try to show you a little bit about what we are doing and how I got there to do it, and my goal would be to give you an insight into the work we are doing and how I got there. And as it is supposed to be a discussion as well, I would like to find some trigger points that are interesting for you to talk about after my presentation or after going through what I prepared as a presentation. Actually, it's called Immersive Spaces, the talk. Actually, you gave that name. Immersive spaces is, or generally immersive is quite a buzzword at the moment, and it's kind of a trend to use that word. For me, it's something, of course we use it as well in our terminology and how we sell our projects. We more like to call it media spaces what we are doing, but generally after thinking about it, is something that was always with me, whatever I was doing, the immersive experience, spatial immersive experiences, and that's what I'm trying to show you a little bit today. So yeah, I'm Martin Retschitzegger. Currently call myself creative director. It's also just a word or a title, so it's we call it media scenography, which is another buzzword, or how you call it, Fachwort, to define something. It's what I'm doing at the moment, and it's maybe the best fitting title, but I will try to also explain to you what it means in our daily work. I started, as told before, I'm a hotel son, so I learned tourism that's what I studied. I actually here in Salzburg went to Hotelfachschule in the late 80s, and in the early 90s started going into, I realized early that this is not my destination to work in tourism, and I was always very into, let's say, the early club scene at that time, and so it was the early 90s when I got into techno, which is, I would say, my first real immersive experience, because and also a very cultural impact to everything I did afterwards. So I'm not really a techno DJ anymore professionally, but it's still influencing my way of life, because at the same time I started going into music and organizing clubs. I also got into let's say the visual field of this culture, and also were looking for, let's say, a profession besides DJing and running labels that that will also fulfill my, let's say, visual part. So I got into computer graphics quite early, and at that time I had to learn everything on my own. I didn't have to, but I realized that in the early 90s there were no real options to study it in a way that would fulfill my, let's say, really technically seen. They didn't have the computers I wanted to work on at the university, so I thought, okay, try to get some money, buy computers, and start on my own. That was at the same time, and so when I started with the whole techno thing, so I just got into computer graphics, learning it on my own, and this was something that went on through the 90s, running a little company in Vienna at that time, a label and also a club. And in the mid of 90s, towards the end of 90s, I started the company together with two partners. Also, they're all from Austria, but I moved to Berlin for obvious reasons, so for the techno scene, and also for having more, let's say, professional opportunities in the field of media design. So I worked at some TV station as a motion designer. It wasn't called that like this these days, but it was the early stage of doing animation for broadcast. And then at the end of the 90s, actually exactly 20 years ago, we started that company, Mbox. And of course, it went through some changes, and we had to learn where we are aiming for. But at the moment, we call it Berliner Studie für räumliche mediale Inszenierungen und interaktive Installationen. So in English, it means like spatial media stagings and interactive installation. In our sense, it's spatial is the combining thing. We are originally coming from media and animation, linear media in a classical sense. That what we started at the beginning, and but from the beginning on, we were working in a spatial field. So most of our projects were. Our first project actually was the Expo in 2000 in Hanover, and so we had the 360-degree projection there. So it was already I would say nowadays a classical immersive installation. And later on, we were going more and more into the interactive field. It was never planned, but it was an obvious thing for us, because in the way we work or in the way our field was developing, the technological part was always very important, because you couldn't do just make a nice animation and I give it to somebody, he plays it on the big screen. This kind of approach never really worked. So we had to think about, okay, how does the media work in the space, and how can we take care of that? What we are thinking of is really working there, and it's really the way we imagined it on site. So the technical part was always quite crucial for us, and also, of course, it's something in our background, in my background. What's also interesting from the techno perspective is also the technological part, which is in this field since the 90s evolving really fast, because media technology, IT technology was kind of separated, grew more and more together, and nowadays it's really one thing, but something we always had on our watch list, or something we always had to work with. That was really one reason that got us into this temporary spatial field of working, because there the technological part was quite important. And on the other hand, something that's also was always with us is that we were working quite from the beginning on in a commercial sense. So we were started not as an art collective or something. We were started as a company, and we had big projects from the beginning on. Our first project was for the Telekom, and then the Expo, and so we always worked in a commercial sense. But the field we are working on is not defined by the commercial area, because Actually, it's more everything that we use, all the ideas are usually coming from the art or science area, because commercial field never really invents something, I would say. So the commercial field is always interested in using everything that's around, and in that field we are working, it's quite the prototyping area, because when you're working for like Mercedes for a car fair, they have a lot of budget, they have a big space, and they're willing to experiment in a certain kind of sense, in the sense of, okay, they don't mind having a large LED wall, and you are put there in the position to do something with it, really just like that sometimes, because they really say, okay, we want modern technology and modern presentation technology. So it's something we always were working on, was this technology, but the inspiration always comes from art, and in my case also always from, let's say, the techno experience, I call it again. So we always were working in that field between commercial production, commercial design, but working with technology, also science. It's maybe a bit, not the right word, but the kind of technology we are using sometimes feels like you're doing a scientific testing of technology. And but always, and that was our goal, like an artistical approach, even if it's commercial, try to bring as much of your artistic approach into it. So that's kind of the area we're working in. Today I want to like show, I don't really want to do a big company presentation, but I will run through a few projects we're doing, and then we'll show you 3 projects in more detail. First, a little show reel. It's not really, it's quite old actually, but gives a little impression. Okay. As I said, quite not a newsreel, but you get a little sense, okay, sometimes really big spaces, lots of projectors, lots of LED wall, and seen from the technical perspective, and many of these projects are, let's say, judged from the technical perspective, and sometimes they're also approached like that. People say, we have a large LED wall and we want something there, and that's not the way we approach it, but we always try, of course, to do the best with the space and the technological opportunities we have. So I'll just quickly show you some projects that are like typical from a commercial field of working. For example, we just realized a showroom for the Deutsche Telekom, which is at the same time a security operation center for like the central security operation center. So it's a space they really to have an overview about net attacks and anything. At the same time, they have a 360-degree projection there. When they have like showcases and clients coming in, like partners, then they show a big presentation there, and we designed the whole space, programmed everything, and designed all the media. So this is the kind of maximum we do sometimes: design the project from the space from the beginning on, design the media, then take an overview about the development of the room, and then make the movies and program everything in the end. So Other project I mentioned it are some like flagship projects we did for the Expo in Shanghai, which is a magic box in which was an immersive LED space with a cube which has LED projections on all 6 sides, and we did a 7-minute movie for the space. You could walk in on a glass floor and have a 6-minute presentation of an it was actually a film about energy transport in China. It was a Chinese company. At the same time, we did for the Saudi Arabian pavilion at the Expo also a very successful installation, which was actually one of the main attractions at that Expo, with having queues up to 8 hours for seeing that 6-minute presentation in a very immersive space. We were on an automatic walkway. People could, in a 6-minute journey, they were automatically moved to that space, which was projections on a large curved screen and a lot of reflections combined with patterns. This is the kind of project actually this image film for the Saudi Arabian kingdom, which is really a hard thing to do basically. But also here we really found a way in the middle to make it really an experience for people who didn't really care about Saudi Arabia at all, and they already had a really good time. Everybody in there just enjoyed the space and the way you could dive into that space. So it's sometimes the kind of work, I mean, we are working very commercially, but we're trying to always find a way to also have an artistic approach to this kind of project. So another one is another Expo installation for in Spain, in Zaragoza, 2008. It was a large interactive floor, also for a Spanish company, Acciona, which was actually in the end a pure artistic project. It was, for that time, I would say, even a large touchscreen. People could walk on that floor, interact with the floor, but it was combined with a very painterly style animations. So it was very technical, but in the way it was artistically approached, it was very organic. And that's something that we also are interested in, that the technology should not define the style and the other way around. So we're always trying to combine that in a surprising way. It's another picture from that. It was up to like 300-400 people can walk into that space, interact with a linear storyline, but have really interactive chapters in there. And that's what I said before. Interactive installations are, for us, something that involves people doing something, but we still try to do in a scenographic way, so that we are also try to have our storyline working in the space, but have people being involved. And that's what is interesting for us in the immersive field we are working, because it always involves people in space, other than like in VR, people being isolated in a virtual world. The way we want to work with immersive is something that is an experience that people have together. Classical project, as I said before, is car fairs. We did, for example, for Mercedes at the IAA, a large generative installation with a LED screen where we tracked cars that were influencing the screen. So a lot of what we are doing is classical animation, but also we do a lot of generative and real-time programming at the same time. So it's something we judge as equal ways to communicate your message at the beginning of a project. And so this is also something that's typical for us for a project. We really like to have just a pure abstract form of communicating something. Also, we did do a lot of projection mapping, which is in this case also very commercial. It's the Daimler Jahreshauptversammlung. It's every year we are projecting on a large object and simulate a as a physical body, which we are also combining with animated media. And sometimes it gets these worlds I'm talking about touching a lot quite directly, because we also did for Audi club installation, for a temporary club, where we did a projection on the dome wall, which was a real-time generated VJ setup, which is, let's say, for me, coming from a techno background, something like visuals combined with, in this case, commercial approach, having, like here, we had like 4D projectors just projecting on that small dome up there, but all the content was real-time generated. So this is just some overview, and what I would like to do now, if I still have the time, I hope, we'll show some projects a bit more in detail. Some projects that I would call a little bit like Herzensprojekte, something that gave us the space to work the way we like to work. So one of these is the so-called Black Box. It's a museum in Erbach, and the briefing didn't look very promising. It was an installation about the Franz from Erbach, which was a duke in a small village close to Frankfurt. He actually was quite active, and he started ivory carving as a business there, which became like a real business factor at that space. And they have an ivory carving museum for quite a while already, and they want to renew it, or actually move it to the castle, which also Franz built. And Franz was also a maniac collector. He has, in this building, he has collection of Rüstungen, I don't know, armors, and all kind of defected hunting stuff. And the architect told us, we have to design a new museum, and we have a space for you. Actually, it's the African trophy room, which is from the current duke, his private chamber where he collects his from his African hunting. Yeah, it's not something antique. It's really the current space, and they had to wait till that old duke was dying to use the room, because it was really his private his private room. He inviting his friends, showing his trophies from Africa. So, and they said, you can make something in that room, but it has to be installation about the Franz. And that and we were very skeptic, but the architects were really cool guys, and they had the good situation that the minister of Hessen promised that this museum will be open in 8 months, which is something that's not possible in a museum space usually, because you have to go to political instances. So the architect just got free hand, and he can do something what he wants. So, and he did like a very a concept that he didn't involve any local people, which gave us the opportunity, and him as well, to do something the way we wanted to do it. So he gave us the space. We started designing some different. It's only 60 square meters. It's not really big. So for immersive space, you can't work with projection. It's too small. So you always have to find ways to. So we came up with many ideas how to work with an interactive table or something, or with having lots of screens on all the wall, and we in any anamorphic form. So at the first stage, it's usually always the space for us to get started, because this is our medium in the end we are working with. So we always also work on the storyline at the same time, but the space is defining a lot of the opportunities. In the end, we came up with a quite simple idea. We have only like 5 screens there, and you see that small space, but we said, okay, we make 5 screens. We put 3 screens on the front side, put some LED lights on the back side, and we make mirrors all over the room on all the other surfaces. So we have our goal was to have the small room, but you get into it and you have the feeling of a big space, and have something where you can have an abstract way of storytelling, which you always can like refined different angles how you can see that story. So that's just a matter of 3D visualization. You can see it's not really big, and then we get like some first renderings. The second thing that was important for us, and that's maybe something I didn't mention that much until now, but like sound is always a very important part. It's of course equal media to visuals, but most people come to us for the visual part because that's what they're seeing on the images. But people usually don't realize that sound is like equally important. And in this space, we thought it's really important. So we had a sound system with 25 speakers on the roof. So we had like a really way of immersively telling sound stories there. And we came up with a concept that has a virtual diary of the fronts, and the virtual diary goes up till today. It's not something just about the time he was living in. He was also talking about current political issues. He was telling his story up till now, because, for example, ivory was forbidden in the late 50s or 60s. Since that, there's no more ivory carving at Erbach, so it's an important part. And he was also talking about situations like that. And it's like a 12-minute loop. It's linear, but it's like very hard to decipher. You usually watch it twice, or you go out after 2 minutes if you don't like it. That's what's happening a lot there, actually, because people going there usually go for ivory carving, and a lot of the people, it's a bit too extreme for them. Anyway, we also, what was really nice, we had really, there's a lot of historical material, but not really a lot you can use in a classical media production. So we decided, okay, we go more for a visual data language, I would say. So we were more or less visualizing the data in the space together with the audio. So we had a quite abstract concept using some materials, like which also the Duke was traveling a lot all over Europe. He was quite involved in the whole Aufklärungsszene. So he had really interesting biography, and that's something we tried to involve in that installation. But in the end, it was also quite something, that's what I call the techno approach again. You had some moments in there that were quite flashy and quite reduced, and with that sound installation, we had some classical components like endless piano loops in there, but still a lot of glitches and other audio elements we were mixing in. So yeah, let's see a short movie there. Okay. The good and bad thing about a space like this or installation like this, you can't really capture it on video. It's something you have to go there, especially the sound, and even we don't have a lot of the talking in there. It's really just working there, to be honest. It's looking okay on video. We won really a lot of awards with this because it looks like cool design. basically said, but it's not really that something we're really aiming for, because the main goal is for us, and it really worked there. If we go in there, we are amazed ourselves, and that's something that not always is like that, especially if you work on a project like this for half a year, and then you know every like angle of it, and then you go into the space, and it's not always easy to get a kick out of it yourself. In this case, it worked, and this is the let's say also the goal we always have, and it's and their work, so we like the project. That's why we show it. Okay. Another project which is also kind of a crazy project, and but also great. It was for Hornbach this year. We got a briefing from the agency. It looked like this. It's about toilets. So they wanted to do something special about the toilet. They send us like even with typos in there. Like it's not from us. That's a briefing we got. Okay, we want like do the most amazing toilet, and whole Germany should talk about it, and it should be crazy, but should be positive, and it should be. So that was the briefing we got. And they also said, okay, they had some ideas. It should be immersive, and should be media all around us, and so this is a classical print agency, commercial agency, really good agency. They do all the Hornbach commercials. They have a really good relationship with the client. They really push the ideas as far as possible, and it was for us a great cooperation, because an agency like that just have ideas, and they think like in commercials, and if they work with an agency like us, they leave a lot of freedom to us. So we had this project, we could do everything again, design the space, design the storyline, just make the sound, everything. Again, approaches what kind of form and room you can make, and the whole thing was also not clear how they want to use it in the end. It was clear they want to have a social media project in the end. That was what they're doing in the end. It was actually an exclusive art installation in the end, where they had in like 100 people and shot a movie about it. Okay, but again, we had like forms like being inside of the stomach and everything, and had a space like find your inner circle. That in the end was the concept that we went through. It was like go for a spiral form. We wanted to go away from also classical immersive media. Having a 360D screen is for us not really interesting anymore. We want to work with like spatial media forms. That's the nice part about the technology evolving here, that you are not limited to classical screens. Anyway, you can design your own space screen, and this was the opportunity for doing that. And we had this idea, and that was the final design, more or less. At the same time, we had to design a storyline, which was about the whole process. It was a 3-minute storyline about from activation to meditation to fighting to eruption and relief. So it was a linear movie, but also that also went through quite well with the client agency. Then we had a little space in Friedrichshain in Berlin, where we then transformed the whole, which actually was a Tischler space, that we worked together with them, and we set the whole thing up in a Tischlerei, I don't know the English word. Anyway, so all the designs were like custom built for a 1-week installation, and then we did our mapping part, which is let's say the most technological part, having then projection adapted to it, and in the end we had a quite working space, and that was also like quite rewarding, because in this area you can really amaze clients sometimes, because everybody who walked in there, from the clients who were involved all the time, they were just happy, which is kind of not normal in the in the field of advertising and commercial communication. So this is a rewarding part about our work. And so we had a drone, and we had some spiral way in with stones, people, and then if you sit on the toilet, the whole installation get activated, and you see that 3-minute movie, and there is some after show, and they would document that on video. And okay, I'll show you a little video there. Ja, okay, ich pushe. Okay, mit Audio dann manchmal. Das war Rollo der Klempner. It's all just a short version. It's a 3-minute experience, and if you go on Hornbach's page, you can see the original comments of the people. They have long versions of the movie and all the stuff. And actually, I think was quite successful for them. The whole social media feedback was great, and for us, it was also yeah. So I'm just going quickly to the last project I wanted to show, which is a real free project. It's something we did at the Luminale, which is a light festival in Frankfurt. They offered us a couple of locations where we can do installation, which were like large buildings and everything. But the one thing that caught our attention was this little Snow White statue, which is in a little park in the middle of the banking district, which was the main drug place in the 90s. A lot of people died on the place. So it has a kind of historical background, which is not just positive. And we thought, okay, we're doing all these big mappings. We want to do something more intimate and do something we can do, have people watching on small details. And so we did a photogrammetry of that model, and I quickly go through that. We have an own framework, which is a real-time offering environment, which we want to put to test on this project. Just a little screen capture of that. You can really work with a lot of different generative technologies, and you can put them on 3D models. And on that project, we tried to make a little scenographic scene on that, and make a real-time installation there. Everything we did really put together on site in Frankfurt on the last days. We just programmed a lot of presets before that on the 3D model, and just a lot of different generative real-time presets, and which we were then combining with a sound installation, which were closely or loosely related to Snow White, and also the place on site. And then went on there and set the whole thing up, and it was in the last day snowing like hell. We were sitting like, which Snow White in the end got really. We were sitting and working there in the snow because if you do a mapping, you really have to do a lot of manual adjustments, and minus 10 degree on snow was quite hard work, but it was kind of rewarding, because the next day, the first day, all these people came suddenly, and for the first time ever, we had like real, let's say, feedback of non-professional consumers, because in most situations we work, is people just go to that installation or presentation, And so sometimes we had up to 300 people standing on that small space watching on that figure, and you can see so it was a pure artistic project for us, but also kind of rewarding. And I will quickly show that video, then I'm done. Okay, that's about it, what I wanted to show. Okay.
So thank you, Martin. Are there any questions? Then we want to start. Marius, the last. Come, fix this.
So, working with light and sound, you're working with two materials that you cannot really touch. At the same time, you're speaking a lot about interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Are you planning, or are there other projects where you're expanding the media, the visual and the acoustics, into something else where you get touch or whatever?
Mm-hmm. It's in the project featured here. It's maybe not that obvious, but generally we are work with that a lot. I mean, we are, because especially if you work with real-time media, you obviously have the opportunities to work with all kind of interactions. So we work a lot with all kind of sensors actually. So we also do work with just pure haptical installations as well. With that means you just have sensor feedback. So for us, yes, that's not something we're expanding to. That's something we are already doing. I mean, the project I just showed were quite linear, but all the last 3 projects I showed, on all of them is always a discussion. We make them interactive or not. I don't know if this answers your questions, or if I should go more into detail, but
maybe the background of this question is that if you're only watching something, it always seems a little bit distant, which fits well to, I think, an approach that maybe a big company has. You have to create something shiny and don't think too much, just make it big and bright. At the same time, how should I put this? A lot of companies that do commercial work are criticized by artists.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure why, and maybe you also have heard this. And my question was maybe because it's related to this distance that you're creating in at least the projects that you showed, and you don't want to let the work come too close, which means it has to work for a couple of minutes, but then don't go under the surface. Or maybe I'm also talking.
Yeah, I don't think it is like that. I mean, it can be like that, but in a lot of cases, it is not just like. I mean, of course, companies want to mainly achieve sensation and want to have it Instagrammable or something like that nowadays. That's the most important thing, and it's just, of course, in the end, another big opportunity for our area. But I don't. Of course, this is that's what I tried to explain before. That in some in projects where we have the chance to give the people the second experience, and interaction doesn't have to be any, let's say, installation in the space has kind of interaction involved in a positive or negative sense, because people and also I showed you this project and we had some negative experience with it, because you have this close figure. We want the people to go really close, and people were going further away. The more people were getting, that's something you really had to, and it was really no no intention in the sense of like on a commercial thing where you say people you want just bring over your message. We want the people to stay there, but on the other hand, people were staying for like sometimes for 4 or 5 cycles or something. But for example, this distance that was happening there is something that's a general thing that annoys me nowadays, and it's even in if I come from the club perspective, it's something that's also changed the last 10-15 years. People are always put themselves very easily in the viewer position. If you go into a club nowadays, all the people are always dancing, facing the DJ. Something that doesn't make sense for me, never made, but it's something that wasn't happening in the early days, but nowadays it's always like that. And if we are trying to make spaces, you try to make it not front-looking, and you try not to make that audience situation, but that's at least a point. But if you want to go deeper into that artist commercial discussion, it's, I think, yeah, it's let's say especially if you're like us, also get inspiration from the field of art and transfer it to commercial installations, you might put yourself into that position that you are ripping something off. I personally don't see it so, as long as you are kind of honestly doing your own thing, because this whole separation process of what is subculture, art, and commercial is quite, these boundaries are, from my understanding, not so separatable. But
thank you. Any other questions?
Hi, thank you for your talk. I was wondering, when you do interactive installation, like the one in Zaragoza, how much prototyping does that involve, where you try to get that working?
This is, I would say, pure prototyping. The whole project is something like this was never really done before, because I mean, we are, in this case, we work with software. It's called V4. And we really worked with the core programmers half year on it. So the whole software got adapted on the whole, and we never really know it's gonna work out. So in this case, so that's what I said before. I'm trying to be cautious about saying working with science, but we also work with some institutes and talk with them and go run through some processes of getting funding for doing some field work in this, because in the VR and all these fields, we always were kind of involved in the early stages. So it's pure prototyping, and that's also pure risk taking if you do that for a commercial company. And that's, but it's on the other hand something that drives us, because it's also, besides being a creative challenge, also a technical challenge. So, but we have other projects where we did like real-time projection mapping on moving objects, where we were using a light tracking system and really prototyped an interface for using it for tracking 3D objects and mapping onto this. And it's, yeah, it was also in this kind of crazy, because people don't really realize what you're doing, and sometimes we only do this once, like on this interactive floor. We did other interactive floors, but like years later with a different technology. And but it's always learning what you're able to do in the next thing people approach you. So that's.
Thank you.
No problem.
It's a naive question, probably, but could you define the word immersive for me?
Yeah, that's like I said, a buzzword, and I'm definitely not somebody who can philosophically define that to you, but it's something that, from my understanding, involves all your senses and puts you in another space, kind of, and that's what I meant before. Having a good dancing or club experience can be quite an immersive experience, even. And nowadays it's mainly used with VR, for example, because it's like an obvious medium that you can put on and you're somewhere else and you're immersed into a different world. But in the end, it's for me, I would say anything, also analog ways of immersing yourself into something, even just into your thought or into smell, or if you close your eyes and listen to music and have something going on in your head, this can be also immersive, from my understanding. Does it answer the question?
Yeah, I just asked myself what is the difference between, let's say, a Wagner opera and your immersive space?
Mm. In the end, for me, not really any.
Okay.
I mean, if it's for you as a consumer, works this way, because you can sit like this in a Wagner opera and think, okay, what's this bullshit? And I fall to sleep and I think about something else. So it's maybe one definition could be that at the moment you're being there and your thoughts are also there, what you're seeing. That's immersive for me. If you are sitting in a cinema and you totally dive into a story, that's also 100% immersive. And if you're sitting in opera and you totally dive into the story, setting, sound, or whatever, can be just one part of it, then you're immersed.
So maybe follow up to that, you mentioned the senses, and as you already kind of discussed with Marius, you work a lot with the visual, the audio, a little bit with tactile and haptic experiences. Following the logic that more senses involved means more immersiveness, do you think, if that is the logic, do you think that there's opportunities there for example, taste and smell? And have you ever worked with that? And do you see that in your future work, maybe?
Taste and smell is, personally, we're discussing with people who are doing olfactory immersion, and there is technology there around, you can involve it, and I think it's something that's definitely in the long term very interesting. Technology wise, what I saw so far, it's not really there to be really brought into. I mean, if you go into a 4D cinema, which is something you can find in any tourist attractive space, they use this technology from 4D movie, and there is always a slight or big boundary between what's doable. But I think sensors in general, yeah, one tool, and that's why for us also interaction. What we are said at the beginning, we are doing Inszenierungen, and what the point of Inszenierung in comparison to like a pure interactive installation is that we are always try to bring a story in, and meaning that that the pure make something that's pure interactive and pure reactive and still communicate your story is a very big challenge. That's but that's in the end the most interesting field. And we actually got into anything related to real time just because of that fact, because we were seeing quite early that it's not the only way, or in the long term, just linear media or just playing your video on a large screen is not the future alone. But it still will always be also one option, I guess.
You've got time for 2 more questions.
Hi, thanks for the talk. A more technical question. So you mentioned that you're working with V4 for the projection stuff. Are you involved in the programming of V4? So are you releasing patches, or is the framework you mentioned in the Snow White project only like for pure working, like for your company?
I'm personally not patching, but we are quite involved in the concept part, and the whole framework we showed before is something that is put on top of V4. We have a large, complicated patch that's running and stuff, and I like V4, and but from the artistic point of view, it is kind of limited and something that's also a little personal project, and that's what the main tool is. It's about bringing the power of this node-based, very flexible workflow to the artist, and that's what we are doing, is having like a framework on top that allows you to mix in a familiar environment. You saw that in a video, it's like using After Effects, but you have a lot of geometry-based workflows in there, and you can save it and you can use it without any knowledge of V4. And so it's, on one hand, it's separating a bit the programming part from the creative part, what we're doing, but still bringing in the creative programming part in another way, because that's because I'm working with this generative technologies for quite some while, and there's lots of limitations, not technically, but in the way an artist can use it, because it can only like accessed by somebody with a, let's say, a deeper technical knowledge, and that's what I'm interested in. That's but we are also developing parts for V4 for the community and stuff, so that's also, if that is.
Okay, this brings the last question. After this, we're going to break it up to smaller groups, if you're interested. Anyone, any other questions? Easy to punch.
Thanks. So you mentioned you also collaborate with science to a certain degree, or you from a technological point of view, you often work with like what's cutting edge or not yet existing. So you develop your own technology to a certain degree. So the question I have in relation to that is, what is the piece of technology you would really like to have, but that is not yet existing or not yet available? So what should we develop or someone else develop?
That's a hard one, I would say, because I always think the most interesting thing is always a combination of technologies. So it's for me hard to point out something that's just because it's technology in the sense of sensor or AR device or anything. It's just technology. But the tools, on the other hand, to use it creatively is something that often comes later. So so if I would just say that kind of technology that makes, I don't know if I say mapping completely easy or whatever, it's hard. I don't think I have an answer, precise one, because I think the most interesting part from the artistic point of view is that the technology gets really much more accessible, but could go more into detail if it comes to like scanning a 3D space, and it's all like saying you make a real space really interactive in the sense of you can touch any object and it's interact and reacts. You can do that already, kind of, but it's really hard to do. You have to put up 6 Kinects and synchronize them, and you can't do any like real 3D scanning in a space that's like real time. That would be something saying, okay, if I can scan a 3D space in real time with 60 frames per second and get this back, that would give you lots of amazing opportunities. That would be, let's say, a piece of tech that might be interesting, or would give you push you to think about, okay, you can do anything with that interaction. You can do projection. You can make it, Okay, let's say that would be cool. And I don't think it's there yet. Okay.
Thank you.